War of the Words. Written by ButterflyCoffee, read by TARDIS9. Percy had settled in nicely since arriving on the Island of Sodor. After running away on the main line and being rescued by Gordon, the little engine was much happier to be working in the yard fetching coaches and trucks. Gordon, Henry and James were happier too, at not having to shunt. Percy is a cheeky sort of engine, but when overworked or teased, he can become grumpy and irritable. He knows better than to bump coaches, but is often surly with the bigger engines. Gordon, being a proud engine, doesn't like it when Percy is sharp with him. Neither does James, who can be conceited and bad-tempered. After one long hot summer's day, Percy backed down into the shed. He was tired and wanted nothing more than to rest his aching wheels. But Gordon, whom Percy had called names earlier, decided to speak up. "You should have more respect for us bigger engines," he said to Percy. Percy groaned. "Well, you should be nicer to me." "Respect is earned, not given," huffed Gordon. "A small engine like you can't understand what it takes to earn the respect of an important engine like me." Percy didn't know what respect meant, but he thought being nice ought to be common sense to any engine. "I think important engines ought to be nice all the time," grumbled the green engine. "We can't be nice all the time," snapped James. "Sometimes we get hot and bothered and our needs have to be seen to." "I get hot and bothered too." "Not as much as I do." Percy grouched. "I do too. I bet I do more work than all you big engines put together." James laughed. "You with your tiny wheels, you could pull half as many trains as me." "You don't pull many to start with," said Percy. James let off steam crossly. "What did you say?" Percy usually minded James when he got into a temper, but tonight he was too tired to care what was said. "You just sit in the sun looking like an eyesore whilst I hurry here, there and everywhere getting your trains." "Really?" fumed James. "I have to go all over the island with my goods and passengers. You have it easy staying here in this yard." Now Percy was cross. "If it wasn't for me, none of you would have any coaches or trucks. You'd have to fetch them yourself." "It's a good thing we have you, then," hissed James. "We can get on with the jobs we have to do instead of being rushed off our wheels doing things that don't concern us." "Your swanking about has nothing to do with me, but I still have to look at it," huffed Percy. James was indignant. "Swanking, am I? Let me tell you." "Yes, you do swank," said Percy. "You swank so much that I've gotten your train, and it sits waiting for 5 minutes whilst you look like a peacock. No wonder the Fat Controller's always cross with you being late." Gordon and Henry watched with interest. They should have told Percy to be quiet and not be so rude, but I am sorry to say they found James's eye funny and didn't say a word. They wanted to see what would happen. The red engine was seething. "If I'm a peacock, at least I look splendid. That must make you a frog with the way you crawl about." Percy was offended. "I am not a frog. And besides, what use would frogs have for being on the railway?" James was triumphant. "If you aren't a frog, then you're stupid. That proves it." "I'm stupid?" squeaked Percy. "I didn't run into 2 tile wagons because I was too busy trying to plan how to get someone back." Henry sniggered, which made James crosser still. "At least I always whistle to let people know when I'm coming, so they'd change the points for me." "Well, at least I don't bump coaches so much I need a bootlace to fix them." "Says the one who leaves his driver and fireman stranded on the main line and runs away." "Says the engine who crashed into a field on his first day." "That was not my fault. That was my wooden brake blocks, which, by the way, I don't have anymore." "Should we say something?" whispered Henry to Gordon. The big blue engine chuckled. "We could, but we shouldn't. finished Henry. Who thought it a good idea to give an engine wooden brakes anyway? Percy rapped. Maybe the same person who made you look so ugly, James shot back. Lancashire pogs are much nicer looking. Your smoke box pops out like a tortoise's head. Percy was now upset. My smoke box is lovely, thank you very much. Besides, I don't look like a red signal, or a lollipop, or a stop sign. James gave Percy such a look. My red paint makes me look smart and eye-catching, he snapped. You can't say the same about your grubby green, I'm sure. I spent half the time at the washdown that you do, bubbled Percy. I wouldn't want it. You flounce off when a bit of coal gets on your buffers, but I get on with it. Yes, drawled James. You and Sud get on very well together. I bet you love it so much you roll in it like a pig. Percy, having run out of insults, hissed steam loudly. He sulked to himself for the rest of the night. That's James, he thought. He is simply horrid. He needs to have his boasting seen to, that's for certain. Instead of going to sleep, Percy stayed awake thinking of how to pay James out. As he thought, he reckoned he ought to pay all the big engines out. They all ordered him about sometimes, and they could all be difficult. Gordon will be easy, Percy simmered. A simple switching out the train trick should do. But James needs something really special. Percy wasn't sure what he would do, but he knew that when the opportunity arose, he would use it wisely. That was War of the Words. It was written by ButterflyCoffee and read by TARDIS9. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this, you guys. I actually particularly liked this one, as I feel it provides a good bit of expose between when Percy arrived at the end of Troublesome Engines and his solo volume, Percy the Small Engine. As I think it particularly heightens, well, just how cheeky Percy could be to the other engines, and also how willing he is to pay them out. Well, kind of, cause in all fairness, let's just face it, Gordon and James are both being a bit, well, let's just say, it's another case of them letting their arrogance get the better of them. Well, I honestly wish I could narrate or write more of these. That was just, my course and everything. All the same, though. This work, though, by ButterflyCoffee, I mean, seriously, I actually really enjoyed reading this. I couldn't help, I was practically almost close to laughing first time I read it, especially that bit with the argument between James and Percy. Oh man, that's funny. Seriously, if you haven't checked out ButterflyCoffee's channel, I seriously recommend that you do so. Especially the Newton Abbot saga, which is fabulous! Seriously, I'll put a link in the description below. Anyhow, dry rails and good running, and stay safe, everyone.